morning. It is great to see you here. I want to add my welcome to that of others and to just say it is nice to see this room filled, and boy, this is a beautiful group of people, and it's so good to see you. I want to thank the faculty and staff particularly for your investment in the lives of our students. I know that you work every day to challenge and to support them so that they can learn and grow intellectually, spiritually, and personally. I'm so grateful to you for your work. Would all of our faculty and staff please stand? Board members, thank you for being here. It's great to see you this morning. It's great for you to be here at the beginning of this year. And there are many of our board members here, and I'd like them to stand as well. And Ben, thank you for thanking our special guest. You're right. These are people who are committed to the institution. They've supported the institution for many years. Many of them are pastors who pray for us. Many of them are donors who give for us. And I just want to say thank you for being here as well. Students, you have made a great choice. I know I'm a little biased, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. You've come to a place with strong academics and where you will be known, and where you will receive a personalized, Christ-centered education. I look forward to this year and journeying with you as we begin the new academic year. This morning, it's my privilege to introduce our Convocation speaker to you. Jim Lyon was recently ratified as the General Director of the Church of God, Anderson, Indiana, and assumed that role on August 5th, 2013. I had the privilege of serving on the succession committee for about 2 years. And I am so pleased that God spoke to Jim and led him to this place. And so pleased that he's here with us today. The Church of God founded Warner Pacific College in 1937, and we maintain a covenant relationship with the church today. My introduction of Jim is going to take a bit of a different form today. I'm going to ask Jim to join me here beside me as I share with you an introduction by way of reading a citation commemorating the college's awarding of an Honorary Doctor of Divinity degree to Jim Lyon. As I share Jim's background with you, I believe you will understand the appropriateness of the honor that we bestow upon him today. So Jim, will you come join me? Warner Pacific College is privileged to bestow upon Jim Lyon the Honorary Doctor of Divinity. The honorary degree awarded at Warner Pacific College recognizes merit and excellence. It is given to persons of exemplary character whose contributions to their field of endeavor, to society at large, to the work of the church, and to the college deserve public attention. Jim, a former student of Warner Pacific College, has served in countless civic and community service roles, including the Christian Conciliation Service, Community Justice Diversion Board, the Billy Graham Crusade Committee, the Mayor's Commission on Domestic Violence, Hopewell Center for Developmentally Disabled, Community Hospital of Anderson, Community Health Network of Indianapolis, United Way of Madison County, the Madison County Ministerial Association, Christians Broadcasting Hope, which he is the speaker on Viewpoint, and then the Board of Directors of This Hood Is Ours. As pastor and host of Viewpoint, a radio ministry of the Church of God Ministries, he has distinguished himself as a visionary, communicator, and leader of the Church of God in North America and around the world. Jim now shares his strong gifts of leadership as the General Director of Church of God Ministries. An Irish citizen by birth, Jim was conceived out of wedlock by a member of the Irish Republican Army who was imprisoned by the British in Belfast Crumlin Road Jail, and a young Irish woman from the Gaeltacht. Through a remarkable turn of events, Jim's birth mother found her way to Seattle, where he was relinquished for adoption, placed first in an orphanage, and then in foster care, and then again in an orphanage. Jim was adopted by his new parents before his first birthday. Pioneers of the Church of God in the Pacific Northwest, his mother's family were people of deep faith. Jim found an immediate and unconditional love through his family and the church, where a sense of being chosen, the consciousness of providence, the clothing of grace, the investment of heaven's purpose, the conviction that God redeems, makes whole, and destines formed the foundation of his faith. From an early age, pastors and leaders of the church modeled, taught, and poured their lives into Jim, who made a definitive decision for Jesus when he was in the 7th grade. That moment and his baptism a few weeks later focused Jim's heart and set his ambitions. Jim entered his first year of college at Warner Pacific in 1970 and was soon seeking out opportunities for leadership involvement. He went on to attend the University of Washington and earned a bachelor's degree from Seattle Pacific University in 1974. Desiring a career in politics, Jim was enrolled in the prestigious University of Washington Law School, an opportunity he saw as a graduate school for public service. At age 29, he became one of the youngest members ever to represent the 74,000 people in Northwest Seattle in the Washington State Legislature. Jim was eventually persuaded that the Lord was calling him to ministry, not the White House. Jim returned to his roots, becoming a pastor of the church in which he was raised. After 20 years of service to the Fairview Church in Seattle, Jim accepted a call to Madison Park in Anderson, which was then called North Anderson Church, where he served as senior pastor until sensing the call and being selected for the position of General Director of the Church of God Ministries in 2013. Together, he and his wife, Maureen, have raised 4 sons. His family continues to grow through the blessings of marriage and grandchildren. Jim speaks of the church as a masterpiece, as described in Ephesians 2:10. Who we are as people, how we are adopted by the hand and providence of God for his purposes, his destiny, and his providential will. That is what empowers us to change the world. In accordance with the conditions for awarding the Honorary Doctor degree, by the affirmative vote of the faculty and the Board of Trustees, Warner Pacific College confers upon Jim Lyon the Doctor of Divinity Award for his accomplishments and dedication to ministry in the Church of God, Anderson, Indiana, and around the world. On this day, the 27th of August, 2013. Please congratulate Dr. Jim Lyon. Dr. Dawson will assist me in hooding. And then this is the diploma. You want to look at Kathy. We can put this over here. I welcome Jim Lyon to speak to us now. Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Cook, and to the faculty and trustees for bestowing upon me this very sacred honor. It's no small thing, I know it is not, and I receive it humbly. I have a heart place for India, to which I've traveled many times, and I often go there in the company of my physician. His name is Scott Green, who is also my friend. And for many years, I served on the board of the Community Health Network in Indiana, which is the second largest healthcare provider in the state of Indiana. In that role, they once presented to me a leather satchel that was inscribed with a white medical cross and the words Community Hospital on it. It was a kind of sophisticated medical man bag, and I found it very useful. And I carried it with me everywhere, and one year I traveled with my doctor, Scott Green, to India with my community hospital bag, and we went out to do screenings and things in the villages where we would perform medical clinics to people who had never had access to medicine before. And I went simply to carry the box of antibiotics and, do the grunt work. But in every village we went that year, I had my medical man bag, and all the villagers came to me as if I was the doctor. And I started to joke with Scott about that and said, playing around a little bit with him that I was really the real doctor that they recognized. And in these villages, the endemic problems were twofold: oral cancers and uterine cancers. Oral cancers because of a social custom of chewing particular native vegetation which had carcinogens in them and created these oral cancers. But uterine cancers thought to have developed with a rampage because of certain hygienic practices which were really not that healthy. In the end, Scott, I think annoyed with my pretense of being a doctor, said to me at a village, "I'll tell you what, Jim, I'll take the oral cancers, you treat the uterine cancers." I stopped pretending to be a doctor on that very day. And I'm telling you that story to say, in the receiving of this award just now, I make no pretense of having undergone the rigorous academe necessary to earn a doctoral degree. But I receive it proudly because it bears the mark of this institution, which is sacred to me, because of what this place has done in my life and in the life of so many others. And I wear the regalia today not because I deserve to wear it or could be a peer of the faculty, but because it is an emblem of the high and noble purpose of what all of us in this room today can be engaged. When I came here in 1970, the world was quite a different place. I've been taking a trip down memory lane this fall as I've come back to the campus, remembering those days. That's a long time ago. Here's how long ago it was. When I parked my car, and I was one of the few students then who actually had a car because my parents, in a mad pursuit of spoiling me rotten, bought me one. And as I drove it here, I parked it right there in the street and walked across to what was then called, inelegantly, the men's freshman dorm. And a woman came out of what is now called Smith Hall. We called it the co-ed dorm, not because men and women cohabitated there, but because there was a wing for men and a wing for women. A woman walked out. Her name was Lula Bennett. Sister Bennett, we called her. Her husband had been the pastor of the church into which I was first adopted. She came out to greet me and welcome me, and then happened just incidentally to reference that she'd seen the First Lady interviewed on the Today Show and how lovely she was and how glad she was that she was the First Lady. The First Lady was Pat Nixon. That's how long ago this was. There was a White Front store down off 82nd and Division. White Front, for those of you who don't know, was a pre-incarnate manifestation of Walmart. White Front is gone, Walmart lives. The taco house out on 82nd was the preferred place to go and eat if you did not have to eat on campus. But it was not open very late. In fact, nothing in Portland was open late. The only thing that was open where you could buy food after 9 o'clock was at the Portland airport. And because I had a car, I had a routine almost every evening, certainly on odd-numbered days, every other one, where people just gathered out there on the lawn to see who could get in Jim's car to go to the Portland airport after 9 o'clock, because it was the only place you could go to get off campus and find food. And we would drive there, and I was always amused by the Portland airport in those days because it had just two center concourses, just two concourses at all, but they were right in the center of the terminal. Concourses K and L. I thought this represented great vision and aspiration. The presumption seemed to be that they'd get A to J concourses on this side someday and M to Z over here, but we're starting with K and L. And between K and L, there was a little restaurant where you could buy a hot fudge sundae until midnight, and I promise you I kept them in business. So much has changed in those days, but some things have not changed, because the integrity and the purpose of this school has never wavered. This is a school that understands that the open and free pursuit of knowledge is to everyone's benefit. The truth can be objectively known, but must only be discovered in a process that engages every discipline of knowledge. But in that pursuit of knowledge, this is a school that comprehends that the world in which we live, that the universe in which we breathe, is a world of order, born out of the design of one who was not a God of chaos, but a God of order. And that God has disclosed himself to us most completely, not just in the written script we call his word, but in the person of Jesus. As long as I have known of this place, Jesus has been the subject. And that has never changed, and it must never change. When I came to Warner Pacific College, I did not want to be noticed. In those days, I was quite shy. I never spoke to more than 2 people at once. I did not like to be noticed because I feared that if I was noticed, I would be somehow diminished. I was not an athlete. I was not good looking. No one confused me with Robert Redford, who was then the screen icon of the time. I was the consummate nerd. I grew up with Bill Gates, literally, in the same neighborhood, attending schools just blocks apart. He in the very Tony and private Lakeside School for Boys. I at the public Ingram High School, but just separated by blocks. And we would often cross paths, going to classes, and different things would happen between the schools. Still today, I like to think of myself, like Bill Gates, a consummate geeky nerd, just like Bill Gates is. The only thing that separates me from Bill Gates is this: $60 billion. And when I came here, I didn't want to be noticed because people weren't that fond of geeky nerds in those days. And I remember on my last day in Seattle, before I drove my new car down here to Warner Pacific, I stopped at the Northgate Mall at a store then called the Bon Marché, now like every store called Macy's. And I bought a pair of hush puppies. Hush puppies may not be familiar to you, but they were a kind of suede shoe with rubber sole that were the invention of Imagineers in Michigan at the Wolverine Shoe Company in Rockport, Michigan. And they were developed after the Second World War because the soldiers had worn a lot of leather and so on, and this company developed a way to treat the pigskin leather and so on and make it popular, and a lot of the guys coming home from the war wanted to buy shoes like they had in the Army in the sense that there were certain properties that they liked and so on. And hush puppies evolved out of all of that. And at the time I came to college, hush puppies were the rage. Everyone wore hush puppies. And I wanted to buy a pair, not so that I could be in style, but so that I could be invisible. Because if I wore shoes like everyone else, maybe they wouldn't notice me. The text that you heard read here is a dramatic passage in the declaration of Jesus of who he is. And there are several things from which we might draw on this well, but I hope you remember these as you begin a new school year. Jesus lived in such a way that people demanded to know who he was. There was something about the way in which he engaged the world around him that provoked others who did not even know him to demand, "Who are you? If you're the Messiah, if you're a wonder worker, if you're a leader, if you're the guy in charge, if you're the sent one of God, who do you think you are? We want to know who you are." When is the last time that you walked in this world, that you lived in such a way that someone around you demanded to know, "Who are you?" When is the last time that our institutions, our churches, walked in this world and influenced in such a way that the unbelieving world around us said, "Who are you?" Jesus was constantly under scrutiny, not by design and not because he was a provocateur, but because he had a certain way of presenting himself and touching the world around him that demanded an explanation. When I came to Warner Pacific College, I did not want to change the world. I wanted to be invisible. My mind was not preoccupied with the great questions of life. I wondered, how would I do my laundry because I'd never done it before. I wondered if I would find and discover any beautiful young women here who might cross my path. And then secondly, I wondered, would any of them agree to go out with me? This was the sum of my hush-puppied invisible life. And the answers to the two questions are yes and not exactly. And if you want further explanation of what not exactly means, I'll meet you in the foyer after the service today. But when I got here, I discovered a world, as has already been aptly described. When you come to a college like this, the principal thing you will learn is about yourself. That there is something about the engagement, the pursuit of knowledge in the company of others that helps open your mind. I began to see Portland as a city that I'd only seen on a map and had not paid much attention to when I was growing up in Seattle. I began to see the streets of Portland and the bridges across the river. A whole new world opened up to me in a way that never could have happened if I had not come here. Jesus was often asked, "Who are you?" And he replied, "Well, I keep telling you who I am, but you won't listen." And then he went on to say, "Who I am is disclosed not just by what I'm telling you, but by what I do. My works tell you who I am." You see, Jesus was supremely confident in his self-understanding. The scripture tells us that he came from the Father, and he knew that he did, and that he had come into this world to do his Father's will, and that he would be returning to the Father. And in that absolute security, the knowledge of his journey through life here below, he had complete confidence, and that confidence generated a kind of power that startled the people around him. Those who knew him and did not know him. Those who were threatened by him and those who were drawn to him. Every person in every station of life, in every place he went, they were amazed about this unique quality of someone who was so self-possessed, so certain of who he was. You see, Jesus demonstrated and earned the right to speak into his world because he knew who he was, and that confidence allowed him to act boldly. We are this week in our nation, and indeed around the world, marking the 50th anniversary of the famous speech at the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., delivered by Martin Luther King Jr. on the March for Washington. It was actually dubbed the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Most people don't remember much about that event, except that Martin Luther King said famously, "I have a dream," and then began to articulate with great power a dream of a nation that was one and not subdivided artificially. Most of what he spoke then that we remember was delivered off the cuff. It was a departure from his prepared remarks, but there was something in the moment. There was something in the minute that descended upon him and upon the crowd, upon the country, upon the world, that has forever after changed the trajectory of human development. Truly an historic moment with very few peers. But the thing that makes Dr. King's performance and his delivery and his content so powerful is that everybody there then knew, as all of us now know, that Martin Luther King had earned the right to speak by the works he had already done. He had already changed the face of the South by organizing the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama. As the pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, he had rallied the city. He had rallied his people. He rallied people who were not his people. He focused the moral energy of heaven upon a desperate and terrible wrong. And he paid the price for it. And the photographs of Martin Luther King, the young pastor and father and husband, handcuffed and thrown against the desk in the police station in Montgomery, Alabama, spread across the world. He marched on Selma. He endured the spit. He endured the water cannon. He endured it all. And then when he stood to speak, he had earned the right to speak in a way that others speak but are not heard. We live in an age of technology and social media that makes all of us think that we have the right to speak. Who gave you the right to post something negative on Facebook? Who gave you the right to somehow pass judgment on someone else? An individual, a culture, a country, an institution, a way of life. Who gives any of us the right to speak into any of the moral dilemmas of our time? Who gives us the right? What gives us the right to speak truth boldly? It's the works that we do. Jesus declared plainly who he was. I and the Father are one. It was the most sweeping claim of divinity ever made by any person that ever lived. For all of the theological conundrums, for all of the wrestling, for all of the books, for all of the analysis in modern time and in the centuries past, what cannot be denied is that everyone who heard Jesus speak it unmistakably understood what he meant. He was not claiming to be a great teacher. He was not simply representing himself as a noble prophet. He was not just in a succession of revelation where there would be greater prophets later. He said, I am God. And you won't believe it. But if you don't believe what I say, see what I do. They were so incensed by this lightning bolt from above that separated all of human experience, that they picked up rocks with which to stone him. And then he said, as only God himself could speak, I have heretofore, in front of all of you, done great and good works. For which of these things I have done will you now presume to kill me? Flummoxed and in their rage, the audience said, we're not killing you for what you've done, but for what you say. We live in a world where words matter. We live in a world where speech impacts. But we also still live in a world, as did Jesus walk, where the right to speak is inextricably hinged on what we do. As already referenced, I was conceived out of wedlock by two people that I have since learned to love and appreciate that I did not know at a young age. But my father, by birth, Edward Jordan, was a member of the Irish Republican Army. He grew up his whole lifetime in the County Antrim outside of Belfast, longing for the day when the 6 northern counties of Ireland, which are now resident in the United Kingdom, might join the Irish Republic. This was the passion of his life, and from the age of 5 until he passed away in the 1990s at the age of 76, he lived and breathed and exuded all of that. When I first met him, I was curious to understand who he was. I was 39 when I first saw him face to face. At first, I wanted to see the features of his face to understand what I might appear to be as I grew older also. As an adopted person, you don't grow old with people that have their same genetic makeup. I didn't know. Would everyone at age 42 in my family line develop a hunchback? I wanted to see. He stood tall and proud, even then in his early 70s. But as I began to become acquainted with him, it was the story of his life that captured me. And he described how he'd been arrested by the British constabulary and had imprisoned at the Crumlin Road jail, which in Ireland is famous as the place of political prisoners. He described their kinds of treatments and things that I could not hear described in polite company. It was a horrific experience for many years. And as he described it to me, I had to interrupt him and say, I don't know, Edward, anything about Irish politics. I'm not here to take a position on whether the 6 counties should be part of the Republic or not, or whether or not the Crown should continue to reign in Belfast. I cannot speak to that, but what is clear to me is that you have paid a terrible price for what you believe. How did you endure all that you have endured? How do you sit before me as a sane man, speaking intelligently about a cause that you still hold close in your heart? And then he stared at me with my same eyes. He looked across the table. We were seated on 2 couches across from a coffee table. And he looked at me and he said, listen to this. I was imprisoned by the British. They can pass their laws in Westminster. They can send their troops to march about Belfast. They can set up their police roadblocks and their ID check stations. They can pass their taxes. They can conscript our young men. They can do whatever they want. But I am a free-born Irishman. This is my island. It is not theirs. It was given to me by the birthright of God, and they will never be able to change that. And then he looked at me and he said, never forget who you are. And ladies and gentlemen, today, I want you to know that Edward Jordan, whatever people believe about his politics, in the villages of the County Antrim overlooking the Loch Ness, which is the largest freshwater lake in Europe, second only to Geneva in Switzerland, in the sloping, terraced, and beautiful pastoral scene of shepherding and growing, in that part of the County Antrim, Edward Jordan's voice, though he has been dead now 15 years, still rings. Why? Because everyone in the area knows that what he spoke, he believed and acted. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. All of us in this room have the sacred capacity and responsibility to change the world. Everyone in this room who believes that Jesus is God and Lord has a distinct and providential call to interact with a broken world as Jesus did, healing, mending, restoring. In every place that injustice becomes just, darkness is turned to the light, ignorance is driven out by knowledge. In every place where those who are broken are mended and made whole, where illness is vanquished and health is restored. In every place where relationships broken are brought back into harmony. In every place where a soul is redeemed and breathed again into by the holy God of the universe for eternal life. The kingdom grows, and all of us have a chance to be a part of that great advance. But only if we set our ambitions on not being invisible, not being passive, but on being engaged. Only if our works earn the right for us to speak. And so I say, yes. Ephesians 2:10 is a word to remember. You are God's masterpiece, created new in Christ Jesus for the purpose of good works that God planned long ago beforehand that you should walk in them now. And ladies and gentlemen, as you begin a new school term together, never take for granted the sacred privilege you have to be here, and make it your ambition in this school year to interact with this city, in this city, in a way that earns you the right to speak truth, even as Jesus did. I thank you for welcoming me here today.